We know that these senses are there, and let's say the mind is there. Instead of focusing on too many details, we will just focus on the senses, that is, eyes and the mind. Now, whenever there is an instrument working, that instrument will work irrespective of anything happening unless there is an external disturbance. For example, supposing you set up a camera. Even if you are not operating it, the camera will go on taking pictures. For in satellites and all, as you know, or if you have some hidden camera and that CCTV and all, it goes on taking, unless somebody goes and stops it. Now, when you are walking down the street, you are looking at 1,000 things, but you don't remember. Sometimes you are not even aware, and sometimes you are listening, or rather hearing but not listening. This is one major complaint that parents have towards their teenager kids. They say that he never listens to. Words are entering and they are going out. Now, if these were really the instruments, the real ones, they would never fail. Like recording. If you are recording something, it will record everything. It will not miss out anything. Now, why is it that sometimes you say that, well, you were saying something, but it did not register? That means sometimes it is working and sometimes it is not working. That itself shows the limitation of the senses. If the senses were actually conscious, like eyes, if eyes were the real instruments of seeing, then eyes would have never failed. That means there is some power which kind of stops working, and so the eyes, even though looking, doesn't see. So now similarly, if these senses, eyes, ears, they were really independent, that means they were really conscious, in that case they would have the power of knowing each other. That means if my eyesight were really independent, they could have seen the words. They could have seen the tests. Like that. Because they're independent, they can do anything. Consciousness means independent. And independence means it cannot be restricted under any condition. And not only that, in that case, senses would have known their own nature and senses would have known the nature of others. But we know that we cannot hear things with our eyes. We cannot see things with our ears. That means limitations are imposed. And in the mind, we find that when we are watching, say, a movie or a sight, for example, I am sitting in front of all of you, I am seeing you, I am hearing you, I am getting the smell. How all those things are getting harmonized? That means there is something beyond these senses which harmonizes all this. So fundamentally, this is very clear that senses under no condition can be considered to be independent, nor can they be considered to be conscious. Because if they were conscious, they would have been applicable everywhere and they would have known each other, they would have known even themselves. We find that the synthesis of all these five senses is done somewhere else. So that something has to be more important than the senses itself. And that's something normally we talk about mind. Mind has another very serious problem. We know that mind is always in a flux. Sometimes you are happy, sometimes you are not happy. Sometimes mind is working, sometimes mind is not working. Sometimes mind is paying attention, sometimes mind is not paying attention. This can always happen. But the real important thing is that you are aware that your mind is in a flux. The idea is that the mind, as we understand, is in flux, and that flux is observed by something. That means there has to be something more subtle than this flux thing. There is a fundamental law of life that nothing can act on itself. Please keep this thing in mind. This is a major argument that the Vedanta uses for 1,000 things. There is nothing that can act on itself. For example, Here is my right hand, and I can grasp anything with this right hand, but I cannot grasp my own right hand with this right hand. You cannot. The eyes can see the entire world, but cannot see itself. The famous expression in Sanskrit is Swa-Kriya Abhav. Action on itself is impossible. Whenever there is action on itself, so for example, there is a sword can cut anything, but that sword cannot cut itself. A sword can cut another sword, but not itself. This is a very, very, very famous saying, Swa-Kriya Abhav. Swa means self. The action on oneself is not possible. Now, if action on itself is not possible, then how is it that mind, the knower, knows mind? Well, mind is a knowing instrument. And you say that I know my mind. I know I am not happy. I know I am angry. I know my mind was not attentive. So there has to be something more fundamental that is observing mind too. Because mind cannot know itself by its very nature. Like your eyes cannot see your own eyes, your ears cannot hear yourself, and your hand cannot hold yourself. Nothing can act on itself. Mind as a knower cannot know itself. So there has to be something which is more fundamental. Why more fundamental? Because when you want to grasp something, the thing itself has to be more fundamental. Supposing we want to measure the length of this table, and you come with a long pole to measure it. No, you cannot measure it. If there is a long pole, you cannot measure this table. To measure this table, you need a smaller unit, some inch tape, with the help of which you measure that, oh, it's slightly less than a meter. It's always the subtle that helps you measure the gross. You cannot grasp this subtle with the help of gross. You catch the gross with the help of the subtle. Whatever is catching the mind has to be much more subtle than mind itself. Because mind cannot be the ultimate knowing entity because we are knowing the mind. Because we know the mind, so mind cannot be the ultimate knower. And because something is known by something more subtle, so the actual knower has to be far more subtle than mind. And this subtler than mind, and because it's subtle, it's much more powerful than mind. The moment you think of moon, you have reached moon. The power of this subtle thing has to be more and more than that. And that is where comes Atman. That which is behind this mind, that which knows mind also, that which reaches moon and star faster than the mind. That is Atman. This is that Atman due to which a person is able to have experience of the senses, and not only the senses, even of the physical activities. It just uses pleasure, the five sense activities, and just what enjoyment. The enjoyment, whatever kind of enjoyment, and the experience of the senses come not because of the senses, but not even because of mind, but because of Atman. Eteneva vijanati. Once you have known that Atman, there is nothing else to be known in this world, because you have known the ultimate source. Once you have known the ultimate source, nothing is to be known any further. You know that everything originates from here, everything emanates from here.